The scripture today is a little confusing. If you've had a chance yet to get over to Kids Corner, you'll see that I was telling the kids that if it doesn't make sense off the top, that's usually your first clue that there's much more going on culturally than we understand in our modern world. This scripture has been referred to as the dishonest servant. Right away, that title sets us up to think the master is good, that they are in the right, and that the servant, the manager, is wrong in what they do. That they're the bad person. So when you already have that set up, it's really hard to look at through another lens into the story because we're looking for ways that the manager, the servant, messes up, and we can't quite figure out why at the end the master, the one in charge, is rewarding him for being smart. It doesn't work. It doesn't compute. So I'm going to suggest that we actually just take a step back and look at things a little bit differently. And a few things that we have to do first is just define terms, because we have English Bibles based primarily on the King James translation. Now, the King James translation happened at a time when they didn't have good resources to Greek or to Hebrew or to Latin. In fact, the Catholic Church had a corner on that particular market, but it was not a familiar thing to a lot of folks. So you already have the handicap of not really knowing the original languages or what they even were based on. So when in the translation, they were based on an interpretation of an interpretation of an interpretation. They were not necessarily good translations of the original text. That's why most of us who are scholars will say the King James is a horrible translation to work with. Some of the most beautiful poetry going in the English language, but not a good place to study the Bible. The reason it pops up everywhere is there's no copyright. Anybody associated with that is long gone. In the past 100 years, there have been so many translations of the English Bible, and those people or their families are still alive. So we have to pay to quote that anywhere where we're going to get monetary reward for it. So that's why people quote the King James, treating it as if somehow it's a better version, and it's not. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression. But when the King James is being translated, a lot of our modern terminology just didn't exist. So it couldn't put words into terms that we would recognize today. So a few things to clarify. One is when in the story when Jesus talks about the children of this age versus the children of light. So the children of light were Jesus' disciples, the ones closest to him, more than just the named 12, but all of those who were following him, part of his community. The children of the age were everybody else. Hebrew, Greek, Latin, didn't matter. Everybody else was the children of the age. When the word shrewd is used, it's also translated as wise, to use wisdom. In English, shrewd has a connotation of being skivvy, kind of underhanded. That's not how it is often translated. And when we see the word squandering, it's always also got a negative connotation that people are just wasting what's going on. But the word itself is the same word being used to sow seeds in the ground. So it's not meant to be a word of misuse. It's meant to be a word of preparing for growth. So once you have those terms in place, the story already starts to take a very, very different meaning than is often been told. So we're looking at a master and a manager. Usually how that works, much like today, the manager takes care of all the actual business. The master is the owner, rarely gets involved, just kind of checks in from time to time, but trusts his manager to take care of all the day-to-day details that he really doesn't want to take care of. So we have the master hearing some gossip. Nothing is factually proven, but this is just gossip. Could be from people who are jealous of the success of this manager, or could be people who want the job themselves. Who knows? We don't have any of those details. We can speculate till the cows come home. What we do know is that somehow someone has said something negative about the manager to the master, and the manager thinks, oh my heavens, I've got someone dishonest here. I'm going to have to get rid of them. So he calls the manager in and says, account for yourself, explain what's going on, which, you know what, a lot of management today won't even do that. They will just hear the gossip and they will make the decision. So that already tells you this master is a little bit different from the average owner. So he says, what's happening? Explain yourself. What's going on? And the manager immediately gets really nervous. Like, if I lose this job, what am I going to do? Because in this culture, if you didn't work, there was no social safety net. There was no employment benefits. There was no welfare or anything else that was going to help. The only choice was you were either supported by your family, or you beg, or you get another job. And the manager said, to himself, I just don't want to be a beggar, and I'm not strong enough to get a physical laborer's job, so I got to make this work. So he then goes to some of the people who he had given money to. Remember, money is not wasted here. He gave them money to expand their business, their land, whatever they were wanting. And they were to pay back. Simple transaction. And in the Hebrew culture, they were not accepted to or not allowed to charge interest on whatever monies they had been loaned. Now, it didn't mean that they didn't. They were just expected not to. So that would have been hanging in the minds of the early listeners of this story as well. So he goes to the first man and cuts what they owe, goes to the second person, cuts what they owe. We assume that he does this with everybody. And so he shows this back to the master. And the master's like, oh, look how smart you are. You have made all this benefit with such little owing but me in return. And then the manager is in a different place. Now, not only do we have to understand the context of the story and how the language works, we have to understand where it's placed in the gospel. So we have this story between the lost sheep, lost coin, and prodigal son, so the lost things. And coming up, we have the Pharisees. The very next line is, they loved money. Jesus is trying to make a point. And then he goes to Lazarus and the rich man, that story. By the way, this Lazarus is not the Lazarus that's the brother of Mary and Martha. That's often mistaken. Anyway, so we have this story in the middle of talking about wealth and talking about being lost and needing to be found. This story is not actually about a dishonest manager. He cooks the books, obviously. He's not totally forthright, and he certainly tries to adapt things to his benefit. That we can certainly see. But the teaching that Jesus gives following that is the children of this age, so remember, they're the regular people, not the followers of Jesus, but everybody else, have a shrewdness, have a wisdom about them that the children of light, that's followers, need to adopt. Does not mean they have to get dishonest with money. It means look at how they're using it. Because even in Jesus' day, Jesus was not a stupid man. We have this attitude in the Christian tradition that we do not talk about money. It's dirty. Now, part of that is mixed with anti-Semitism. And we've got a chicken and egg thing going on there because the early church, the early Christians didn't want to deal with money. And the Hebrew or Jewish diaspora at this point in time, we're talking Middle Ages, were blocked out of most of the economies. All that was left to them was dealing with money. And that's where we get the horrid stereotype of Jewish people with money. They had no choice. That was the economy. We needed them, but we also dismissed them. So the mixing of anti-Semitism is always something we have to keep in mind. But Jesus is telling his followers, now this is a few centuries before all of that ideology of anti-Semitism and the dirtiness of money, telling his followers, look at these children of the age, how they are doing things, learn from them, adopt some of their principles. So when things fall apart, you will have this blanket of friendship in all of these places, that you will have a way to talk to these people. There will be connections. But the caution is, do not become obsessed with it. This is where we get the judgment of you have to choose God or mammon. Mammon was an old Arabic or Aramaic word, possibly around wealth. not really sure about that. But the story Jesus was telling them is like, use the resources, use the behavior, use the practice, but do not get caught in the obsession with wealth. Do not start to worship wealth. That is the number one sin that we are dealing with today. Right away, the next scripture talks about Jesus pointing out to the Pharisees are obsessed with wealth. This whole story is about use it, but do not fetishize it. Do not make it the center, because you're only worshiping God or you're worshiping money. You can't do both at the same time. Money is the path to destruction. Anybody can see that. It's necessary evil in our society. It's how things move, whether we like it or not. We're all stuck in capitalism in the Western world. Be aware of it. Use it. Talk about it. Don't pretend otherwise. I remember growing up, there was this whole attitude that if you talked about money, you were just being less classy. And when I talk about money in the church, I already see a little bit of bristle. Like, I need to get paid. I need to be able to pay my bills. I can't tell the phone or the internet company that, oh, I preached a great sermon last week, so please reduce my bill, because everyone was satisfied. That's not the world we work in. Try as I may to be with the children of the light, I am also living with the children of the age. We all are. An interesting kind of hump happened this past week. We passed the line where men have made what women will make by the end of December. It's a gender gap line. And sometimes it's marked as women have to work 15 months to earn what men work in 12. The reason I even mention it is because we allow that pay gap to happen because we do not talk about money, because we do not acknowledge the necessity of it, and then it leaves it open to be fetishized, obsessed about, or just we're treated as awful people if we just even talk about it a little bit. But we all need to be able to function in a world where we have enough money to live. Jesus is just giving us a cautionary tale here. It's not about money being bad. It's about money being a tool. As long as we recognize it's a tool and use it as a tool, that's fine. It's when you obsess about it, when you hoard it, when you don't share it, like the parasite classes we're dealing with, the multimillionaires and billionaires that we have in this world, who should not exist when we have people working in poverty. This is the stuff that Jesus is highlighting and talking about in this story. We need to be aware of how to use the tools of our age without being used by the tools of our age. Worship God, use what's available in society to make it better, and when everything falls apart, you've got friendship and relationship based so that you will have a place to land. In the great metaphorical collapse of capitalism, perhaps? Don't know about that one. But use what's happening, learn from what's around you. Just don't be part of the corrupt machine that makes that the worship of money, the ultimate goal of anyone's life. God or money? Jesus says we've got a choice. Look for the tools, but do not become a tool.